everyone, and welcome to Just Between Us podcast. In today's episode, we will be discussing the murder of Saltanat Nukenova, and I have to tell you guys, this case is extremely dark and heartbreaking. Saltanat Nukenova was beaten to death by her own husband, who also happens to be the ex-finance minister of the Republic of Kazakhstan. So this case literally has sent shockwaves around the country, and it was really big. And just for the context, this case is still ongoing. So keep that in mind as we continue this episode. Saltanat Nukenova was born on May 15th, 1992, which makes her a Taurus. Her friends describe her as a very loyal person, and she just had this kind of energy that you would just feel very drawn towards her. She was a very beautiful person, both in and out. And from what we know about her, we know that she was really into astrology. She had her Instagram blog that was about astrology. She would, read people's natal charts, and it was going quite well. She had a decent following, and she even had like a lot of clients reaching out to her, asking her to read their natal charts. So that's what she did for a living, from what we know. And all seemed to be going well in Saltanat's life until she meets her husband. So, her husband, let me give you a little bit of information about him. So, his name is Kwanduk, and he was born on April 11th, 1980. So, he is 12 years older than Saltanat, and he is an Aries. So he was a very smart and ambitious man, at least from his resume, you could say that much. He got a scholarship in George Washington's University. So after completing his studies in 2001, he became a bank manager. A year later, he worked in the Ministry of Economics. Then he went on to work as the head of several businesses. So, from what we know, this guy is like really ambitious. He held a lot of very high positions, right, from the moment that he graduated from university. And I guess all was going well for him until the year 2017, when he got charged with stealing money. He stole around $3 million, and he kept 2/3 of the money that he stole from the company that he was working at. And in total, there were like 22 people involved in this whole scheme. So yeah, I guess he wanted to make an easy buck. Anyway, he gets charged, his money and assets were confiscated, and he was banned from ever working at government jobs, and he was sentenced to 10 years. So keep in mind, this happens in 2017. Now, for whatever reason, in 2019, he is out of jail. Some say that he was personally forgiven by the president of Kazakhstan. And I also forgot to mention that for some time he worked for the president. I don't know exactly who he worked as for him, but I guess he had ties to the president of Kazakhstan at some point. That's why he was out of jail in 2019. So he spent around 2 years, which I guess tells you a lot about the character of this person. Anyway, Kwanduk, he's been married twice before. He has one kid from his first marriage and 3 kids from his second marriage. Now, mind you, while he was in jail, his second wife was saying that this whole thing, it wasn't true, that he never stole any money, and he was wrongfully convicted, right? She was staying by his side, but once he's out of jail in 2019, he immediately divorces his second wife. So we're in year 2019, and they wouldn't meet until the summer of 2022. And the way these two met was quite interesting. So I guess he found her Instagram page, right? And he starts messaging her and he's like, hey, can you read my natal chart? I want to get a reading from you. And here's an interesting thing. From what we know, Saltanat, like, she would only do readings for women. And at first she was like, no, I can't do a reading for you. I only work with women. But he was really persistent. So I guess he was really attracted to her because Saltanat is a very beautiful woman, right? So he like spams her for 1 month and eventually she gives in and they meet. Once they meet, their relationship, it starts progressing quite quickly. So they met in August of 2022 and he proposed to her in October of 2022, just 2 months after they began dating. And a lot of her friends and family, they thought like things were getting really rushed, to which she, said that, yeah, they've only known each other for 2 months, but they were spending every day together, talking, getting to know each other. At some point, she even told her brother that she feels like, he is the only person that he knows, like, that she knows so well, because they've been like 24/7 together since the moment they met. And she was sure that this is the kind of man that she wants to marry. So in December of 2022, they have their wedding. So everything is progressing at a very fast speed in this case, and that is quite interesting, right? So these two have a wedding, and at first it looks like everything is going quite well. They look like a happy family, and since they've been together for now like 4 months or something, her family doesn't really know him. So I suppose they met, right? But they never really got to know him as a person. But there were some red flags. And the first red flag that her brother noticed was in December of 2022. They decided to celebrate New Year's Eve at her sister's house, right, with her new husband, and his family would be there. So it's a big family gathering for New Year's Eve. And at first everything was going okay until his brother shows up with his wife, and his wife, she got a present for Saltanat, right? But I guess Saltanat didn't have a present to give to her. So she just got one of the perfumes that Kwanduk bought for her and was like, hey, here's my gift to you. And let me tell you, her husband was very upset. So much so that he didn't even try to hide it. Just in front of his brother and his wife, he starts like being extremely rude to Saltanat and telling her like, this is the gift that I got for you. How dare you to regift it? What is wrong with you? And his family tries to get involved because his parents were there, right? And he just shuts them up. He shuts up his mom, his father, and his brother. Her brother says that, the entire evening, just the air felt very tense and everything was tense, and it was a very big red flag because all of a sudden it's like he is showing his true colors, and he is coming across as someone who is really aggressive. And mind you that his family, they were like really nice to Saltanat. Her brother recalls that so they were living in the same apartment complex, right? His mother was living like 2 floors above them, so they would spend a lot of time together. And his mother would tell Sultanat like, hey, your only job is to look pretty for my son, so don't worry about anything. They would often go shopping together, and overall they would just enjoy each other's company. But somehow this was rubbing Kwandak the wrong way. He even got in a fight with his mother over the fact that she would come over to their place too often. So, from what we know about him now, it sounds like he had a very hard time getting along with anybody in his life. But yeah, that was the first red flag. Anyway, after the dinner, when it was like around midnight, her brother leaves their place and he goes about his business, right? And later he finds out that the situation at their house got even worse. By the end of the night, Kwandek would just like flip over the table with all the food, with all the stuff that was on there. And mind you, there were like little kids there too. I suppose some of the kids might have been his own and some might have been like his brother's kids, but he just didn't care. This guy clearly couldn't control his anger issues, which is really concerning. So that is like the first red flag. Next red flag comes around, I believe it might have been springtime. So her brother was working late, and once he came home, it was very late at night. He saw that he had a lot of missed calls from his sister. So, and she left them like several messages. He opens the messages and finds a picture of Saltanat, and her face looks really bruised. And he is like really confused, like, what is going on? Like, is your husband beating you up? Like, I can only imagine the kind of thoughts that were crossing his mind at this moment. So he calls his sister immediately, but she's not picking up the phone. So then he decides to call her husband. And her husband is like, hey, don't be angry. Just come over. We'll talk like men do. It's fine, right? So then her brother decides to, yeah, go to their place. And her husband is not there. He gets into their apartment, I believe. And his sister is not there either. And then the husband shows up, right? Kwandak. And they get in a verbal argument, which then I think turns physical. And Kwandik's entire justification is that this is his family and his sister is now his wife, so therefore this is none of their business. He should not get involved in their family matters and just stay away. That's how the conflict, I guess, ends. Her brother calls his sister's mother-in-law, and she tells him that Saltanat might be at their place because at the time mother-in-law, she was in another city, so their apartment was empty. He goes there, and indeed Saltanat was there. And first thing that he notices, that the picture that she sent him, it wasn't recent, because some of the scars on her face, it looks like they have already healed a bit, right? So he talks to her and he's like, you need to leave this man. Like, what is going on? Clearly he's very aggressive, he is violent. He even goes as far as trying to persuade her to go to a therapist, because in his own words, when he met his sister, it's like she was not herself anymore. She was like a shell of a person that she used to be. And she seemed like she was very weak to him. And he was like, hey, you can leave him at any moment. You have me, your brother, you have our parents, right? You have your family. You just leave him at any point. Like there's no point of staying with him. This guy is a total douchebag. And he even like went as far as finding her a therapist, but she refused to see a therapist. And she told her brother that Kwanduk and her have already discussed the whole situation and came to an agreement, and that she would be staying with him, which is incredibly sad and heartbreaking. And even what we find out from her friends, when she would bring up these things like of him being violent with her friends were extremely concerned for her safety, and they were all telling her to leave him, but she would just not like lash out, but she would just like tell them like not to get involved in her personal life, and she just needs them to just listen to her. She doesn't need them to get involved in her personal life or give her any advice. She just needed to be heard. So that's what her friends recalled about this whole situation. And it is really, really sad that it seems like he had some kind of a control over her. Her friends say that she did actually really, really love him. That's why she wanted to stay. And she was the kind of girl who always dreamt of, getting married and having kids and building a family. Those were her values, and she thought that she would build that life with Kwanduk. And she even thought that, if she would get pregnant, then maybe he would change. And in her heart of hearts, she had this hope that he would change for her, right? That this is not who he really is. He just needs to work on his anger issues, and that deep down he's a good person, and she will see the best in him and bring out the best in him. But unfortunately, that's not how it worked out. After another fight that she ends up having with her husband, her family finds out about it. So initially it was only her brother, but then her parents come to find out about it too. And they say the same as her brother, that she should leave him. There is like absolutely no shame in getting divorced, that she should choose herself. And for a moment there, I think she was perhaps somewhat close to leaving him, but not really. And we also know from the fact that she was taking pictures of her bruises and, the kind of everything that he did to her physically, that she actually had intentions of going to the police at some point. I suppose she was, collecting evidence of what was going on in her life, but she obviously didn't end up going to the police. After her family tries to persuade her to leave him, and it feels like she is about to leave him, there is this light at the end of the tunnel. She was, I think, staying in another city with her parents, right? But Kwanduk would fly to her hometown, and it was just like, let's talk, let's fix it. And unfortunately, she went back to him, and they even went traveling somewhere. I don't remember if it was in somewhere in the Middle East. And that's what like happened a lot in their relationship. And from what I understand, this typically also happens in very abusive relationship, where after your partner like was physically abusive towards you or mentally. There's a period where they try to make up with you, and during that period they would just like treat you like a trophy. They would do everything that you want and try to show you that they have changed and this would never happen again. And unfortunately, in some cases, victims really do believe that, yeah, he's being sincere and he said this would never happen again, therefore, I do believe this would never happen again. And they decide to stay, and then it goes back to those like violent episodes, again, followed by the makeup episodes. So, this was kind of a common theme throughout their relationship. Another part that I wanted to mention about their relationship and what also made it toxic was the fact that Kwon-deok, he was very possessive of her. A lot of the time, he wouldn't let her see her female friends, despite the fact that all of her female friends, they were all married and had kids. And if they were gonna go out, it's not like they would go to nightclubs or bars. No, they would just go to nice restaurants, like get a glass of wine and talk about life. But he was really against it, and oftentimes he would just tell her, well, why do you need them? You have me. You want to talk? You can just talk to me. So he just wanted her all to himself. And here's another thing that his brother said was, or should have been seen as a red flag from the beginning of their relationship. So, those 2 months when they were dating, right before he proposed to her, he would just make their relationship seem like movies, right? He would take her to very nice restaurants, buy her gifts. He would like take her on different vacations. And he just seemed like he wanted to give her the world. And he was so into her. And in hindsight, now her brother says that that probably should have been seen like a red flag. And a lot of times, I guess you could call this sort of behavior like love bombing. He would show this very big, signs of affection. And I think it was, in the end, it was just a way to get her like she was some trophy or something in his eyes. And once they got married, he was, like I said, very possessive of her. And they would just like go through these phases. First is when he would be abusive to her, and the second would be him trying to win her love back and trying to convince her of staying. And we know that by the end, she tried to leave him, like for real. And unfortunately, it didn't go through. But on November 8th, 2023, they went to a restaurant that was owned by his family, and we don't know for sure what happened there. People who know her personally say that she was gonna break the news to him that she was gonna leave him, and that might have been a factor in what triggered him to show this incredible act of violence towards his own wife. But anyway, it was November 8 or 9. Some recollections vary. They were at a restaurant that was owned by his family, and they were in a private cabin, right? And they drink, according to some sources. They were just like, was it like a dinner or something? But eventually they get in a fight, and this fight it becomes extremely violent. He is just beating her literally to death, which is very horrific. I can't even imagine the kind of pain that she was in. And oh my god, it's just so terrible. And I think, I'm not sure that perhaps some of the personnel that was working at their restaurant could hear her screams, but they wouldn't do anything about it. It was also known that Kwanduk, he was really rude to the personnel and just treated them like trash. So it could also be the fact that they were perhaps very scared of him. But nobody does anything. And of course, like, I don't know, I wasn't there. I don't know if the personnel of the restaurant could hear her screams or the fight that they had. Perhaps they did, or maybe they heard nothing. We obviously don't know. But what we do know, that it was November 9th. I think it was morning hours. Kwandek calls his cousin to bring him sheets, right? For no reason. Why would you need that in a restaurant, first of all? But anyway, his cousin obliges, so he comes and brings Kwandek like this sheets, a duvet. I'm not quite sure what it was. And cousin recalls that once he entered the cabin, like he could hear his wife, Saltanat, like it sounded like she was snoring. And Kwanduk told his cousin that she is sleeping and that's why he needed sheets. So he just covers her up. Then he instructs his cousin to let go of all of the personnel, to delete all the video footages in the restaurant. And his cousin again does as he was told, follows all of the instructions. At some point, Kwanduk tells his cousin to bring him food because I guess he got hungry from all of the fight that he initiated. I don't know, this is really fucked up, and this guy is he's clearly a piece of shit. So his cousin brings him food, and as his wife is laying there dying, taking her last breath, he just sits there and eats. He later gives his wife's phone to his cousin and instructs him to go to drive next to the gym where his wife goes, stay in the gym area for some time, and then drive to their house. So the reason why he did this, so ever since he began being violent with Saltanat, her brother would like track her phone, like the location of her phone, to I guess make sure that she was okay, or in case anything happened to her that he could always find her. And that is the reason why many people think that he instructed his cousin to first drive to the gym that she was going to and then to their house. And there's allegedly he at some point finds women who look like his wife, and he would undress his wife allegedly and make the other woman, his wife, look like, to wear her clothes and like walk out of the restaurant. So I guess he knew that she would die after all the injuries that he inflicted on her, and he was already trying to come up with a master plan on how to save his ass. So I guess his plan was allegedly to make it look like they got in a fight, and there'd be a footage of a woman who looks like his wife leaving the restaurant, and then the GPS would show that she went to the gym and then she went back home, and then he would claim that she ran away or something. But regardless, it was around it wasn't nighttime, it was more like an evening. At some point his cousin realizes that his wife, she just like stopped snoring, and it's like really quiet. So then he goes to her and he checks her pulse, and he realizes that she is indeed died. After that, he just calls an ambulance. Ambulance arrived, and it was way too late, as you can probably imagine, and she was pronounced dead on a spot. And this story is really heartbreaking, and it's really difficult to believe that somebody could do something so vile and evil, especially towards a person that they're supposedly love so much and don't want to ever let go of. And it was really, really crazy and sad. And a lot of people really do question his cousins, the way he described the events that happened during that day, because after her body was given to her family, and they flew her to her hometown so she could finally rest. Her father and people who saw the body, they describe the kind of wounds that she had as very horrific. And if his cousin, like, he says that he heard her snore, but then if he saw the way she looked, he would probably realize that no, she's not just sleeping. It looks like his cousin beat her up and she is in just this horrible condition. Definitely not sleeping. He should have called an ambulance from the get-go. And also, when he's being instructed to take her phone and drive to her gym and then drive back home, at no point he is like suspicious. He just like follows orders. This is really weird. Now, I don't think that he is lying about hearing her snore when he arrived at the cabin, but it's also very questionable that at no point during all these weird orders he got suspicious or decided to involve the police. So, like I said, this case is still ongoing, and it was extremely shocking for everybody, especially that there was a big portion of the population, and even amongst Saltanat's friends, who describe Kwandik like, at first sight, when you see this guy, he looks like, first of all, he's very well spoken, well dressed. Like, he comes across like this very intelligent person, so they found it hard to believe that someone like him could be so abusive. And a lot of people were shocked too, because this is not just some average Joe type of person. Like, it looks like he was always academically excelling. He got a scholarship to study in the States. He always had this like very good work positions, right? So a lot of people, yeah, were very shocked that someone like him could do something so terrible. But I think it's quite classist. So I don't think that, because it makes it sound like only poor uneducated men beat their wives, and these educated rich men, they're somehow better and more civilized. I think this can happen in any situation, whether you are rich or poor. Just remember, like, Big Little Lies and the marriage of Celeste and Perry. And Perry is like very charming, good looking, intelligent, rich, and yet he just is an abusive husband, right? So I guess being all those things don't guarantee you being a decent human being. And after this happened, there was like a lot of opinions. A lot of people felt terrible for what happened, and they want Kwandek to get the harshest sentence he could ever get. But there were also some people who were trying to clear his name or justify his actions. There were people who were speculating that she was probably cheating on him, and when he found out, he got so angry that he just couldn't control himself. But this theory is not true, at least according to the people who personally know her. They say that no, she was not cheating on him. He was an abusive husband, and she wanted to, leave the marriage. There were also people who were accusing her of being a gold digger and saying that the only reason why she married this guy in the first place is because he is so rich and powerful, and ergo, if she married somebody who is not rich and powerful, she would still be alive, which is, again, a very weird opinion to have, because let's even say, just for the sake of an argument, that she was a gold digger, that being a gold digger does not justify like being beaten to death. Like, what is wrong with you, right? Being a gold digger is not a crime. Now, you can like gold diggers or you can hate them, but I think it's fair to say that no, it doesn't constitute somebody getting beaten to death. And another theory or opinions was that there were like some men out there, and I guess this is maybe the influence of Andrew Tate, like, I don't know, but yeah, they had these opinions like, oh my god, man, they literally hate getting divorced, they take this news very badly, so of course it's on her for wanting to leave him. And when he heard the news that she wanted a divorce, he just got so angry and couldn't control himself, so therefore it's again her fault. There were like some people who were genuinely doing the victim blaming, which is the worst thing you could ever do. I don't know why there are some people out there in a society that will just, until the very end, they will justify a man, a murderer, right? Just because he happens to be a man and she was a woman. And believe it or not, like, there were also people who said that the only reason that this case got so much attention and so many people really cared about this case was the fact that Saltanat was a very beautiful woman. And they said that if she was just an average looking woman, people wouldn't care as much for her death. That's a very terrible thing to say, especially in a case when somebody literally died. And I don't know the statistics. I don't have enough information on whether or not people care about victims based on their looks. But yeah, it is very sad that there are some people out there who, no matter what, will try to shift the blame on a victim. And fortunately, those were, in my opinion, just minority of people. Most people, in my opinion, had common sense, and they were very outraged by this situation. And I want to say that it brought up a lot of conversations about, domestic abuse, and how a lot of the times, like, women, it's so hard for them to leave these abusive men because, they could literally end your life if you try to leave them. And not a lot of women have the means or just like opportunity to leave their abusers. Like we know, like for example in Big Little Lies, like Celeste, like she would get a separate house and she was planning everything, right? When it comes to leaving her husband, and it's because like she had the means. But there are like a lot of women out there who do not have the means, and of course it is a very scary thing. I cannot imagine what it's like just being afraid of the person that is supposed to be the closest person to you in this world, like your significant other, your husband, like a person who's supposed to be, if anything, your protector, and just being scared of them. I cannot imagine how traumatizing it is. So, this is the case of the murder of Saltanat Nukenova, and I really hope that she will get the justice and her husband will be sentenced, hopefully for life, for what he did. And I hope this situation would, you know, be an example for a lot of women who are in abusive situations, and give them courage to leave. And actually there were a lot of women, like, you know, who came forward, sharing their own personal stories of being in an abusive relationship. And there were some women who ended up leaving their abusers, and they said like this story like was like a wake-up call for them. So I would really hope that her death is not in vain. And actually her husband her brother wants to open a foundation in her name that would help the domestic abuse victims. So I hope that she will be remembered and she will get justice, and her murder wouldn't be in vain. So thank you guys so much, and this is it for today.